Alan Shun and I are known as the Imperial Capital's most respectable couple. He never interferes with my extravagant spending on old flames. I tolerate his countless mistresses outside our mansion. But in the 7th year of our marriage, the illegitimate son he secretly raised trampled my son's leg while horseback riding. Children don't know any better. Why should an adult like you fuss over it? Don't embarrass me. With a dark expression, he pushed 50,000 taels of silver notes toward me to buy my son's leg. Seeing the disgust he struggled to conceal, I knew his death would be anything but dignified. Ashley Ning wasn't Alan Shin's first mistress, but she was the first to bear his child and brazenly confront me. My son writhed in agony under the imperial physician's acupuncture, unsure if his leg could even be saved. Yet under the guise of an apology, she stood haughtily before me, fussing over the kingfisher feather hairpin in her hair. Though kingfisher feathers are precious, my elder sister, one of the 4 highest ranking consorts, has gifted me treasures far beyond compare. A mere hairpin is hardly worth my notice. She deliberately flaunted the jade bracelet on her fair wrist, a perfect match to the one I wore. It was a Shun family heirloom, given to me by Alan's mother only after I gave birth to Evan, fetched from the depths of her chest. She said there were 2 identical bracelets, and the second would be mine when I bore another son. Back then, Alan's sister had just entered the palace and relied entirely on my elder sister, the royal consort, for support. The Shun family spared no effort in pleasing me, fearing their daughter might struggle in the palace. The Shuns publicly vowed that Alan would take no other wife but me. Yet promises are only true the moment they are made. Though I remained the only wife in Alan's household, women outside sprouted like bamboo shoots after rain, one after another, and that other son his mother spoke of was born to his mistress Ashley Ning within a year, hidden from me until the child turned 5, when he was recently brought to the capital. Just an hour ago, on the polo field, that boy swung his mallet fiercely, aiming deliberately at Evan's head. Evan dodged the overhead strike, but fell from his horse, only for the boy to deliberately rein his mount over his leg, crushing it instantly, bone shattered, flesh mangled. Now, my child lies in the inner chamber, screaming in agony as the imperial physician sets his broken bones. Each cry a scalpel to a mother's heart. Yet Ashley Ning swaggers before me, flaunting Alan Shun's favor like a dagger thrust repeatedly into my soul. If his leg was ruined on the polo field, blame his own lack of skill. How dare you vent your rage on my son? All the capital knows grace, Yin values wealth above all. Just name your price for compensation. It's only silver you're after. The boy's father has always been generous to us, and he dotes on the child excessively. He'll pay any price to teach him a lesson. He won't hesitate, she rambled on unabashedly, boasting without pause. From their lavish life in a triple courtyard estate west of the city, to the child's extravagant journey back to the capital, to her husband's midnight companionship and meticulous care, she prattled on for half an hour in vivid detail. That tenderness and meticulous care Alan Shin truly never gave to us. Mother and son, what she had, we lacked, and so she felt she had bested the rightful wife completely, claiming total victory. And in that half hour, my child fainted and woke repeatedly in agony, yet the physician barred me from seeing him. Outside, the snowstorm raged, freezing my hands to ice and filling my palms with hatred. But still I waited, waiting to make their son pay in blood. Seeing me pale and clutching the teacup, ignoring her blatant provocation, she grew even bolder. We are both mothers. Lady, why not show some magnanimity? It was just a child's careless mistake. Even for your son's sake, you shouldn't vengefully take it out online. Your son has already injured his leg. If he keeps doing evil and earns the disdain of all the bodhisattvas, he might truly end up crippled for life. I snapped my gaze toward her. She shrank back, hastily covering her mouth with a handkerchief. Oh dear, my husband has spoiled me rotten. I've grown accustomed to speaking my mind without filter. Do bear with me, lady. But though my words may be blunt, the truth remains. If, lady, the housekeeper nanny rushed in with a fresh crimson mark on her forehead, cutting off Ashley Ning's torrent of words. Leaning close to my ear, the nanny said with difficulty, "The Lord is playing chess with the grand tutor and still refuses to return. From Evan's fall from the horse until this very moment, 2.5 hours exactly, I've sent for Alan Shen 3 times. Yet he remains at the grand tutor's estate, accompanying him in chess and poetry appreciation, stubbornly delaying his return. When pressed too urgently, he vented his fury upon the nanny. Seeing the wound on the nanny's forehead from where a teacup struck her, I understood Alan Shen's stance all too clearly. Had it not been for the favor my elder sister once did for Dr. Shen, and Pearl Lu swallowing her pride to call upon that favor to fetch him from his mother's birthday banquet, Evan's leg would likely have been ruined beneath the horse's hooves. Even if the superficial marital affection was no longer worth maintaining, Shen Yuan still bore the Shen name and was his son, Alan Shen's flesh and blood. Yet he could stand by and watch Evan's health deteriorate and his leg cripple. Such a cold-blooded and heartless father is indeed a rare sight in this world. You may leave now and have the estate physician take a look at the injury on your face while you're at it." No sooner had the matron left than Ning Rushua could no longer contain herself and spoke up. "The grand tutor's estate. What a coincidence. My child's father is also at the grand tutor's estate, for no other reason than to beg the grand tutor to take our mischievous child under his wing and gild his reputation. As you know, we parents must always strive to secure the best for our children. Just take the grand tutor's favorite tea, Dragon's Pool Snow. My husband went to fetch that precious ounce himself, all to please the grand tutor. So, 10 months ago, when Alan Shen rushed south to Minyue under the pretense of an urgent matter, braving storms for over 3 months, it was all to pave a golden path for his illegitimate son. When Evan was to begin his studies, I prepared generous gifts and only asked him to visit the grand tutor once, to seek an opportunity for Evan to become a study companion to the prince. Yet he merely glanced at me indifferently and said, "A renowned master produces outstanding disciples, but the disciple must also possess some innate talent. Evan is of average aptitude. What grounds do I have to humbly beg others on his behalf?" Only now do I understand. It wasn't that he didn't know how to ask for favors. It was simply that my Evan wasn't worthy, nor was he incapable of showing care. It was just that since it was my Evan who was hurt, he felt no distress. Even Lady Shen, Evan's grandmother, hurried over for a brief look when he was first carried back to the estate. But as soon as the imperial physician arrived, she impatiently left for the lakeside pavilion to enjoy tea and admire the snow-blossomed plums with her distinguished guests. To this day, she hasn't sent anyone to inquire about him. They simply believe that since my elder sister has been confined to the cold palace, this crude stepping stone of mine has served its purpose. There's no further need to engage in hollow pleasantries and social maneuvering with me. This heartless Shen family, it's utterly devoid of meaning. I must ask you to return my child from the elder lady's courtyard at once. In this howling wind and heavy snow, if they were to catch a chill, with a cold glare, I signaled April Ching to draw the dagger at her waist. Ashley Ning's smug expression froze instantly, and she finally shut her foul mouth with awkward embarrassment. The capital is a place that values decorum and rules. Since I brought April Ching from the battlefield into these rear courtyards, she hadn't drawn her blade in a long time. But today, we had both endured enough, and felt that with Ashley Ning and the treacherous Shen family, there was no longer any need to observe formalities. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the physician finally emerged, drenched in sweat. Fortunately, it was only a young horse, and treated promptly, though it suffered considerable pain with tendons and bones injured. The leg was saved. However, riding and archery may be affected in the future. Though there was regret, the leg was ultimately preserved, and my anxiously suspended heart finally settled back into place. As the physician left with my generous tokens of gratitude, Ashley Ning spoke to me with a visibly resentful expression. It was just a feigned strike that never actually hit his head. He scared himself off the horse out of sheer cowardice. Who's to blame? Instead of faulting her own child for being timid and weak. The lady blames others for daring to play with him. If this continues, what child in the capital would dare befriend your son? After all, it was just child's play. His leg isn't even hurt. You're making such a scene detaining my son. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at for being a poor sport? Apologize to my son, and I'll bury today's incident of your lady's unreasonable behavior deep in silence. How about that? Only after the imperial physician's figure had completely vanished did I lift my eyelids to glance at her. Play games? I'm the best at playing. Pearl Lu and April Ching exchanged a knowing glance, then slammed the door shut with lightning speed. Disgraceful matters should always be handled behind closed doors. I rolled up my wide sleeves, and as Ashley Ning turned pale with shock, the two servants behind her were instantly restrained, each with a blade at their throat, held by Pearl Lu and April Ching, unable to move an inch. How dare you? Ashley Ning's words were cut short as I seized her by the throat. On the battlefield, killing is as easy as slicing melons. Do you think I, raised on the frontier, would hesitate to end a defenseless wretch like you? Amid her disbelief and terror, I lifted her delicate, boneless body overhead and slammed her mercilessly to the ground. Thud! The bracelet on her wrist shattered into pieces, and blood streamed from her forehead. The once arrogant woman now lay curled in agony, clutching her stomach, coughing and gasping uncontrollably, but I gave her no chance to recover, dragging her by the ankle back to the center of the room. Did you never consider this outcome when you targeted my Evan? Finally realizing her fear, she had no time to beg for mercy before I gripped her neck again, lifting her slowly, higher and higher overhead. As our eyes met, it was my turn to smile. How do you like my game? I deliberately let my hand tremble, and she shuddered in fright. What's with that look? It's just a game of lifting you up. Don't tell me you can't handle it. She was too weak to respond. As my grip tightened around her throat, her breathing grew ragged, and her palm-sized face turned pale from suffocation. I tolerated you only to avoid disturbing the imperial physician's acupuncture and delaying my son's treatment. Since you walked right through my door, of course I'll shut it and beat the dog. She finally realized what was happening and struggled desperately. Unable to break free, she kicked at me with legs fueled by hatred, but I suddenly pulled the hairpin from my updo and stabbed it fiercely into her thigh several times. The silver pin drew blood, and she broke out in a cold sweat from the pain. I slowly wiped the blood across her face. Oh, so you feel pain when it's you being stabbed. But my Evan is only 6. How dare you incite your wretched spawn to inflict such cruelty on him, trying to ruin his entire life? You dare to be this brazen and arrogant to my face, thinking your son is in my mother, in law's hands. Unfortunately, he's kneeling in the snow. The longer you rant, the longer he kneels. How about it? Isn't this game much more interesting? Just one leg. My Evan can keep his, but her son might not be so lucky. Her eyes filled with terror, and her body trembled uncontrollably. Her well-maintained hands clawed desperately at my sword, callous grip, but it was all in vain. Amid her panic, I tightened my hold. As you said, it's just 2 legs. The Shun family is wealthy enough to pay for it. Name your price. Better yet, add your son's 2 legs to the bill. I can afford it all. She was terrified, shaking like a sieve, struggling like a dying fish. PL, please, spare me. That's more like it. Every one of Alan Shin's mistresses who dared cause a scene ended up bowing respectfully before me, carrying basins full of gold ingots, and leaving with gratitude. A man who enjoys fleeting pleasures in bed should not make a woman pay with her blood and tears. My principle is, if you part amicably, so shall I. When the women Alan Shin grew tired of came to me politely, I never treated any of them unfairly. If they wanted shops, I gave them shops. If they wanted silver, I gave them silver. As long as they didn't threaten my position as the matriarch or endanger my son's status as the heir. Spending the Shun family's money to burnish my reputation for generosity was more than worthwhile. Of course, there were occasionally those who pretended to be noble, wanting only affection, not money. I couldn't be bothered with them, letting them pine in vain until, after the fickle man lost interest, they slunk away in disgrace. Want true love? Something so fleeting is no match for the solid comfort of a fistful of banknotes. Those who seek only emotion are foolish. But someone like Ashley Ning, who barges into my presence without a thought, is utterly stupid, seeing she was about to breathe her last, and unwilling to bear the guilt of taking a life. I finally slammed her fiercely to the ground. Wiping my hands with the handkerchief my wet nurse had prepared, I turned to check on my son. Ashley Ning, thrown hard onto the ground, suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood from her vicious mouth. She collapsed to the ground like a dead dog, utterly unable to move. The pitiful sight of her disheveled, bloodied state finally eased the rage lodged in my heart by a third. She wants to see her son, take her to reunite with him, pick out the most vulgar curses, and recite them publicly for elder Lady Shin to hear. Remember, only relay the words. Don't let them meet face to face. After all, my dear husband set this trap for me. It's only fair I return the favor. 1. That'll force him to swallow his anger like broken teeth. Grace Yun, get out here this instant. The carved wooden door was kicked open with a crash. Alan Shun, wrapped in a heavy cloak, strode in, bringing a gust of wind and snow with him. His grim face was darker than the snow-laden sky overhead. When my elder sister bestowed this marriage upon him, she made it clear, how he treats me is how she will treat his sister. The Shun family possessed wealth but lacked influence and real power. Though my sister is a royal consort, she remains deep within the palace walls, unable to watch over me. The only family she has left outside. The Shun family sought power. My sister sought security for me, and I needed silver. Alan Shun and I seemed like a match made in heaven. All these years, he still disapproves of my roughness, and I detest the lingering scent of rouge from his visits to pleasure houses. Yet in public, we remain the most dignified couple, granting each other full respect. But today, with his family rising and mine falling, he no longer wishes to keep up the pretense. When Evan's leg was trampled by the horse, the steward sent for him at once. Yet he claimed urgent business kept him away, delaying his return home. He wouldn't even bother to send a formal request to the imperial physician. It wasn't until half an hour ago that I released Ashley Ning's personal maid. After just one meeting with her, Alan Shin couldn't wait to ride back through the wind and snow, hand over that mother and child to me, right under the emperor's nose. You dare to flout the law and take matters into your own hands. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're bringing upon our lord's estate? Grace Yun, even if you won't think of yourself, you should think of your son. With this madness, no one can save you. His face was weathered with fatigue, filled with uncontrollable rage. Yet, from start to finish, he never once asked about Evan. He didn't ask, but I'm determined to speak up. As his father, shouldn't you ask about your son? His leg was crushed by a horse's hoof, and when the royal physician cut open his flesh to set the bone, he passed out from the pain 5 times. Yet you, his so-called father, weren't there. What were you doing then? Accompanying the grand tutor to admire the snow and drink tea, begging the esteemed elder to take your illegitimate son under his wing, seeking prospects and wealth for the child you truly love. Alan Shen instinctively twisted the jade ring on his thumb, a habitual gesture whenever he felt guilty. I told you long ago, Evan wasn't cut out for martial arts. Yet you insisted he learn horseback riding, archery, and polo. Now that his leg is ruined, who can you blame? I haven't accused you of destroying my Shin family's foundation. Yet you dare blame me for not dancing attendance on you women and children. Meeting my calm, nearly icy gaze, he turned his head away. What's done is done. My lord's estate simply cannot have a crippled child as heir. And, with your body injured, you're unlikely to conceive again. His utter confidence showed he was certain Evan's leg was permanently ruined. How could he be so sure? It was because he deliberately delayed calling the royal physician, cutting off Evan's chance for treatment. His heart ought to be ripped out to see what color it truly is. Seeing my continued silence, he thought I was privately considering his proposal and relaxed. I presume Mother has told you, I have another son, long lost to the world. who has suffered greatly. Why not bring him home to raise as the future heir under your care? This preserves the estate's dignity while giving Evan both companionship and support." He sighed, feigning sorrow as he said, "As a father, this is all I can plan for Evan." A cold smile touched my lips before I replied calmly, "Has the Lord never considered seeking justice for Evan? Who ever heard of aiming polo mallets at someone's head? Pure jealousy. My son's virtue and talent outshine his even with 8 horses. How can you, as his father, act like a coward and do nothing when your son suffers such injustice? We must not only blame but also—" I glared fiercely at him. "Demand blood for blood." Alan's shin started at this, then irritably shrank back into his armchair. A child's careless mistake. How improper for an adult to make a fuss. Besides, how should I address an accident? Break someone else's leg? At most, we'll just avoid their company from now on. Evan never had much talent for riding or archery anyway. Better he focus on scholarly pursuits. White Deer Academy is enrolling sons of nobility. Once he recovers, we'll send him there. The illegitimate son is to be taken under the Grand Tutor's wing as his final disciple, all under his careful arrangements, while my son is only fit to roll around with wastrels at the White Deer Academy. When did we, mother and son, become stepping stones and foils for others? I merely tempered my edge to be a proper lady. How did they assume I'd lost my wits along the way? I placed Ashley Ning's kingfisher, feather hairpin beside Shen Yan's hand. Leaning in, I stared directly into his trembling eyes and asked one last time, "So, my lord, you do not intend to pursue this matter?" His pupils contracted, and he lashed out abruptly. "I am a noble lord. To squabble with a mere child would bring shame not only to you, but disgrace to my household's honor. If you persist in this nonsense, do not blame me for showing no courtesy. But what if I insist on pursuing it?" Grace Yun, he locked eyes with me, exuding intimidation. The oil lamp crackled, casting his murderous intent into stark relief. I understood then. In this Shun family, only one of us would survive. After a long pause, he finally yielded under my unyielding coldness. He pushed a 50,000 tael banknote toward me. "Take these 50,000 taels, and let the matter with Evan be settled." To justify himself, he deliberately raised his voice. "It was just a child's careless mistake. An accident. For an adult to make such a fuss only shames our lord's estate. You care neither for dignity nor the position of the lady of the house. But what about money? Indeed, money matters greatly to me. The Bai family army, founded by my grandfather, requires a constant flow of funds to sustain. It is the foundation of my and my elder sister's security. Marrying Alan Shen, he sought power, I sought wealth. It was a transaction of mutual benefit. As for affection, his ever-changing romantic interests and my relentless extraction of wealth from the Shen family made it clear there was none. For years, we coexisted peacefully, well versed in the art of maintaining a respectable facade. The only wrong was his raising an illegitimate son above my own child, and worse, ruthlessly using my son's suffering to pave the way for his ambitions. From Alan Shun's undisguised impatience and contempt toward my son, I knew he, who first shattered our peaceful facade, would meet an undignified end. 50,000 taels for your son's leg. Is that the price in the Lord's mind? He roared in fury. What nonsense are you spouting? What more can you do now? Even if you drive that poor mother and son to their deaths, Evan's leg won't heal. He's already crippled. Must the entire Lord's estate be buried with him? Must we wait for the authorities to come knocking before you release them? Have you considered your sister's plight in the cold palace? My sister, the royal consort, was confined to the cold palace, while Alan Shin's sister was ennobled as a consort for carrying the emperor's child, no longer needing my sister's patronage. So, the Shin family burned the bridge after crossing it, turning against me overnight, even discarding my son like worthless weeds. He didn't even bother inquiring about Evan's injury before concluding on his own that my Evan was ruined. Circumstances force change. Even he, who once swallowed his pride, has learned to threaten. I raised a brow and laughed aloud. But that bloodied mother and son are in your mother's hands. Grandmother, in her kindness, stood up for Evan. I heard one had their teeth knocked out. The other had their leg broken, both kneeling neatly in the snowy backyard. Alan Shun's sharply defined face turned terrifyingly pale when met with my icy smile. Chasing into his mother's courtyard, he asked in a panicked, trembling voice, "Where are that mother and son?" "Mother, they're not ordinary people. They can't be punished." Lady Shun was comfortably having her legs massaged by a maid, completely missing the implication in Alan's words. Lifting her eyelids lazily, she scoffed through her teeth. "No matter what noble house those beasts crawled from, anyone who damages the Lord's estate's dignity deserves punishment." Then she shot me a cold sidelong glance. "And you call yourself a general's daughter? Seems our Shun family's luxury has made you soft. Not an ounce of authority left, letting that bastard curse you to your face without fighting back." He kept boasting about his father backing him up. Who would dare touch him? He even had the nerve to say we should wait for his father to come take our lives. At my age, I've never been threatened by anyone, so I took one of his legs. Let's see who can take my life. Alan Shun felt as if struck by lightning, staggering suddenly. He didn't know that I had always personally supervised and instructed Evan in his riding and archery. There had never been an accident before. Only today, when I took Evan out of the estate, I was detained by Alan's mother. Putting on the airs of an elder, she lectured me before thrusting Alan's cousin from Jiangnan and his illegitimate son, Liu Shun, in front of me. A mistress of a house must have the dignity of one. It's just a child. Our Shun family is wealthy enough. We won't let our own flesh and blood wander outside. That Ning cousin is gentle and well behaved, not difficult to get along with. Tidy up the south courtyard. We'll move that pitiful mother and son in soon. Ignoring my dark expression, she rose with the support of her maid. Consort Shun is with child, and the imperial physician's diagnosis reveals a pulse like rolling pearls. Strong and vigorous. 9 out of 10 chances it's a prince. The future of the Shun family and Consort Shun's own prospects are boundless. As for the royal consort, she has been confined to the cold palace for over a year. Yet His Majesty has not mentioned her even once. With all the enemies she made back then, do you think she could live out her remaining years peacefully in the cold palace without someone looking out for her? Having seized my weakness, she smiled. "You're a clever one, and clever people know how to assess the situation. If not for yourself, then for Evan and your elder sister." As she brushed past me, she shot me a cold, mocking glance. "Remember this. As long as I'm here in the Shun family, you'll never be the one in charge." She leisurely joined a group of fawning noble women from the capital to admire the plum blossoms in the lakeside pavilion, leaving me alone on the drafty corridor, chilled from head to toe. Hatred swept over me like a gale, stoking my fury until it burned white hot. But before I could strike back against Lady Shun, news arrived of the terrible accident. Evan had been injured at the horse track. When Evan was carried back covered in blood, Pearl Lu also brought Liu Shun, the illegitimate son, back under restraint. With red-rimmed eyes, she told me the young master's injury was entirely his deliberate doing. Afterward, he showed not a shred of remorse, even whipping the horse that trampled the young master, cursing it for being useless and failing to crush his intestines. Pearl dared not spill blood within the imperial city, so she dragged him back for you to deal with. Miss, with just one glance at that vicious child, I recognized his identity from the peace lock engraved with Alan Shun's name hanging around his neck. Recalling Lady Shun's threat, I understood everything. This child was their preferred choice for the heir. So, I curved my lips, pressed the child down outside the lakeside pavilion, and said to Pearl Lu, "You've done very well. Why dirty our own hands when watching kin turn against kin is far more interesting." Dragging that little wolf cub along, I deliberately brushed past Lady Shun in the plant-lined corridor. In the brief moments awaiting Lady Shun's return, the wolf, cub of a child, glared at me icily under everyone's watchful eyes. "You vile woman, if you don't release me, my father will kill you when he arrives. He'll send you and your bastard son to reunite in the underworld." Pearl Lou promptly struck him with a hairpin, causing excruciating pain without drawing blood. You deliberately injured our young master's leg, yet dare to boast shamelessly. What kind of upbringing is this? The child gritted his teeth in pain, but refused to yield an inch. He's less skilled. Serves him right. It's sheer luck. He wasn't trampled to death by the horse. This time he narrowly escaped disaster. But next time, I'll make sure he dies without a grave to bury him. You've struck me, and I'll have my father take your life for it. Just beyond the screen, the ladies invited by Lady Shun to enjoy the snow gasped in shock. I nodded to Pearl Lou, and she applied a vicious grip that made the child kick and thrash, cursing incessantly. Only after those ladies frowned with evident disgust toward the child did I give the order. Do not disturb the ladies' tea enjoyment. Take him to the rear courtyard and await the elder lady's judgment. In that snow-dusted rear courtyard, the child, forced to his knees, snarled at me like an enraged dog, baring his teeth. Do you think it was by chance that your health failed after giving birth to Evan Shin? My grandmother tampered with your delivery, intending to destroy both mother and child. To end your line, you should have died in childbirth and yielded the position of Marchioness to my mother. Even if that bastard of yours didn't die by our hands today, sooner or later he'll meet a gruesome end and make way for me. You wretched woman, don't gloat. When my aunt comes for your life, we'll see who can save you then. So all those accidents were deliberately orchestrated by Alan Shun and his mother. Their desire for my death began far earlier than I had realized. They fed me arsenic. I repay them with steel. Is that not fair? Gazing at that foolish child who could not yet conceal his emotions, I smiled. Unfortunately, you won't live to see that day. Just then, Evan's mother returned after glancing at his leg with indifference. The child's eyes lit up, but before he could cry out, Pearl Lou covered his mouth. She then dislocated his jaw with a sharp twist, followed by a pig-like squeal and muffled, agonized roars. The ladies could bear it no longer and recounted to Lady Shun what the child had said, all speaking at once. He remains stubborn. Not only did he insult that young lady, but now he's hurling abuse at you. From the sound of it, quite vulgarly, the Shun family bought the hollow title of Lord Zhenin only because Alan Shun's grandfather donated 500,000 taels of silver to the court during a famine. With no real pedigree, Lady Shun values face above all else. Relying on the favored consort Shen, she looks down on everyone from her high horse. April Qing added fuel to the fire with a warning. Who knows which noble family's illegitimate son this is? Offending him might bring trouble even the Lord's estate can't handle. Better let it go. Elder lady. Lady Shin flew into a rage, slamming the table and shattering teacups as she roared. How dare you strut about our Lord's estate after harming my grandson? If we tolerate this, others will say our household has no backbone. You ill-bred wretch. Since your parents failed to teach you manners, I'll do it today. Guards, pin him in the snow and beat him mercilessly. Break his legs just as my Evans were broken. A mere bastard, no matter how you spin it, could never compare to the legitimate heir of the Lord's estate. The boy, gagged and silenced, was beaten within an inch of his life, each strike echoing his agonized, desperate cries. All the while, his doting grandmother sat just a tree away, sipping tea and enjoying music as if his suffering were mere entertainment, utterly delighted. Only after he'd fallen completely unconscious did I allow his flamboyant mother through the gates. She thought Liu Shun had been happily reunited with his grandmother and came swaggering before me, full of triumph. Little did she know, the very hour she spent gloating and pestering me was the critical window she wasted, costing her son his best chance at recovery. That leg was truly crippled and useless. Lady Shin grew even more smug, sipping her tea before continuing her tirade. Indeed, like mother, like daughter, that wretched woman dared to come to the estate to curse my Evan with broken limbs. Of course I had to knock her teeth out and establish our Lord's estate's authority before all the noble ladies. Two lowly creatures, forced to kneel in the snowy backyard for so long, yet no one from their household came to apologize or plead for mercy. They must be some disreputable mistress's illegitimate offspring. It's best this way. Even if I beat them to death to vent my anger for Evan, no one would dare confront me. The Lord's estate is not what it used to be. Consort Shen now enjoys endless favor and carries the imperial heir. Mother, Alan Shen could bear no more. With a furious shout and bloodshot eyes, he stormed straight toward the backyard. That was Ah Zhao. Lady Shen was so startled, she dropped her teacup, her gaze snapping toward my face. I raised an eyebrow. Who is Ah Zhao? She swayed slightly, then immediately followed Alan Shen as he charged straight toward the backyard. Two snow-covered figures knelt in the freezing snow, whipped by the housekeeper under Mrs. Shen's orders, barely recognizable as human. One had a face swollen like fermented dough, missing 2 front teeth, yet dared only to weep silently. The other, whose leg had been broken by 2 strikes of a board on Mrs. Shen's command, had long since passed out from either cold or pain. At the sight of Alan Shen, Ashley Ning, having endured endless grievances and agony, burst into tears. Master, save me. I fear my leg is ruined. Only when Mrs. Shen, chasing after me, clearly saw the faces of the mother and daughter in the snow, did she finally understand. As if struck by a sudden blow, her body went weak. Staggering, she nearly collapsed to the ground. After just one glance at the child's bluish face and mangled leg, she choked up blood and abruptly lost consciousness. Alan Shen paid no mind to his fallen mother, clutching the unconscious child as he stumbled frantically toward the estate gates. See, this is your precious son. In the end, he chose to abandon you. Madame Shen lay with eyes wide open, lips trembling uncontrollably, yet unable to utter a single word. All her trusted aides in this courtyard were reassigned elsewhere under various pretexts. Now is the perfect time for mischief. Her eyes filled with terror as she watched me retrieve a pill from its case. You're right. As long as you and yours remain in the Shen household, I'll be constrained at every turn, never free to act. But fortunately, it was you who betrayed and harmed me first. So, in seeking my revenge, I can hardly be called unjust or dishonorable. She reached out with the same hand that often slammed tables and shattered teacups at me, grasping at my sleeve, but I brushed it away sharply. I will claim the Shen family's wealth, and I will claim your lives. With that, I gripped her jaw and forced the long, prepared pill into her mouth. Don't worry, you won't die. After all, a vile old creature like you deserves to suffer every agony before drawing your last breath. That pill, which rendered her completely useless, traveled down, tearing through her intestines, inflicting unbearable torment. It was pain comparable to what I endured during my difficult childbirth. Only after watching her vomit blood repeatedly and faint completely, her breath faint as a thread, did I finally leave. What you owe me, you will repay. Ashley Ning and her son were likely severely injured, as Alan Shen didn't return to the estate for 3 full days, even shamelessly summoning 3 rounds of the capital's finest physicians. My Evan has awakened. He remains unaware of what transpired in the estate, his little face somber and despondent all day, until April Ching crouched under the corridor, testing Evan's medicinal broth for poison while muttering curses. When the young master injured his leg, he refused to return home despite repeated pleas, and his pride wouldn't allow him to summon a royal physician for treatment. Yet he's utterly heartbroken over that outside woman and her son, staying by their side day and night without a thought for his lawful wife and child back home. That scoundrel and his vile mistress deserved to die together in the same bed. I looked up and collided squarely with Evan, who had just opened the window for fresh air. Before April Ching could offer her guilty apologies, Evan fought back tears and apologized to me. Mother, I've failed you. I know about that woman and her son outside. I watched quietly as he bowed his head. Bean, sized tears falling on his injured leg and piercing my heart. However incompetent I may be, I wouldn't simply fall from a horse. That child deliberately revealed the protective talisman grandfather gave to father while swinging his polo mallet at me. My momentary distraction caused me to miss a step and tumble from the saddle. When he yanked the reins with pure malice and spurred his horse to trample me, I rolled desperately to protect my torso, but my leg bone was still crushed. At that moment, he looked down at me with a cold sneer, saying that only if I were crippled would mother suffer worse than death. So he and his mother could seize everything in the Lord's estate and vent their hatred. Evan's leg ached, but his heart ached more. Evan dared not speak of such heartache, for he would never wish mother to bear it. It is Evan who failed mother. The 6-year-old child wept uncontrollably. My heart aching for him, I drew him into my arms. This has nothing to do with you. The true wrongdoers act without remorse. Yet you, a victim, blame yourself needlessly. But he shook his head. Father is reckless. Grandmother is foolish. Neither deserves mother's schemes and sacrifices. Is for my sake, for me, who carries the Shun family's tainted blood. That mother endures humiliation to clean up father's mess, strategize for aunt, and uphold the Shun household. Evan is the sinner. It is Evan who trapped mother for a lifetime. I gasped, cupping his face that so resembled mine. How could you think that? Without you, I wouldn't have cared about the length of my life, weathering every storm. But because I have you, I see another version of myself who is needed. One willing to turn a blade meant for killing into an umbrella against the rain, to live a different life and embrace new possibilities. For you and for me, Evan, the consequences of adults are not your fault. Besides, the petty, harmless tricks within these courtyard walls are nothing compared to the blood-soaked strategies I faced on the battlefield. Bang! The wooden door was kicked open again, and Alan Shin stood there, his eyes burning with hatred, glaring fiercely at us. Mother and son. So what? Even if you've ruined Evan, your son is still a cripple, and you've damaged your body beyond bearing children. If I wish, Ruashua can bear me as many sons as I want. Do you think you've won? Grace Yoon, your retribution is yet to come. Evan's hand, clutching my lapel, trembled, his palm, sized face deathly pale. Bearing the pain and holding back tears, he asked Alan Shin, so, my father was pleased that my leg was crippled? Alan Shin frowned slightly, giving Evan a cold glance. If your skills fall short, you've brought this upon yourself. Must you cling to grievances like your uncouth mother? Your brother's life is ruined because of you. Are you satisfied now? I'd say that broken leg of yours is retribution for your mother's countless killings. Alan Shin, Evan's face instantly drained of color, his body trembling like a leaf. Not only did Alan Shin show no remorse, but a flicker of satisfaction even crossed his face at the sight of our pain. I didn't come here today to argue endlessly. The Shun ancestors and elders have been summoned to the ancestral hall. I'm granting Ruashua and her son the status of official wife and legitimate heir as compensation. Noticing my furrowed brow, he laughed. I'm not here to discuss this with you. I'm informing you, the Shun family cannot be destroyed by the two of you. He turned and left, his figure quickly swallowed by the swirling snow. Evan looked up, shivering uncontrollably, and said, Mother, if you feel wronged, take the silver and the divorce papers and leave. Evan does not wish to burden you, silly child. Everything in the Shun family rightfully belongs to you. If I leave, who will make them pay in blood? Who will reclaim everything for you? Patting his head, I smiled and said, Don't be afraid. Want that illegitimate son recognized by the family? He doesn't have what it takes. In the wide, open ancestral hall, the elders of the Shun clan sat neatly in rows. At Alan Shun's request, they laid out the Shun family registry, pressuring me with cold stares. How can Shun blood be left to wander outside? As the matriarch, you should be tolerant. After monopolizing the Shun household for so many years, your sister-in-law never blamed you, only because our family has always been generous. Lady Yun, do not overstep your bounds. Alan Shun's sister, now, holds the emperor's favor in the inner palace, and the entire Shun clan has risen with her. Their attitude toward me, now, a far cry from the smiling welcomes of the past. Before they could assume their elder heirs and enumerate my 7 sins, as Alan Shin had instructed, I quickly responded, You elders are absolutely right. As the rightful mother, how could I turn my own child away from our door? Not only will I welcome him back, but I will do so with the utmost ceremony and honor." They choked on their words, their intended rebukes left unspoken, and instinctively turned to Alan Shen. He scoffed lightly, studying my face for a long moment. "It's good you know your place. Once Ruashua enters the Lord's estate, she will take over household management. If you behave obediently, you'll still have a place and meals here. After the rear dilapidated courtyard is tidied up, you will move there to chant sutras and pray for the Shen family's descendants. And if I don't behave obediently, will you take my life?" I laughed at his overconfidence, smug and self-satisfied. He opened the family registry, but just as he took up the brush, the steward rushed in urgently. "My lord, this is terrible. 3 mother-child pairs have arrived outside the estate, all claiming to bring their children to acknowledge their ancestry, and they've blocked the main gate. The Lord's estate is now completely surrounded. Those women are all your former acquaintances." What? Alan Shun's brush clattered to the floor. Yet the mothers and children outside refused to enter the Shen residence, standing before the crowd weeping pitifully. "The Lord's estate is so prestigious. We fear we might vanish without a trace once inside. We ask for nothing but an explanation from his lordship." Unless Alan Shin came out, they wouldn't leave. Clutching the banknotes I gave them, tearfully recounting their romantic past with him between sobs. Afraid the onlookers might doubt them, they even hinted, yet practically announced, intimate details: the red mole on Alan Shin's buttocks, the birthmark on his lower back, and even his favorite positions. The mortified steward, left with no choice, finally stamped his foot and disclosed everything in front of the elders. All had been kept by the Lord for some time, and each could produce evidence of having been intimate with him. Alan Shun's murderous gaze fell on my face. I brushed my sleeve and replied with a smile, "Are all those my children? Since they wish to be recognized, let them all be acknowledged. As the elders say, expanding the family line is my duty and obligation. This way, I have fulfilled both." Alan Shin trembled with rage, his hand lifting to point at my face, but I interjected, "If the Lord doesn't hurry to silence them, I fear such family conduct will be reported to the Emperor by the censors and ruin Consort Shun's prospects." The crowd paled, their earlier arrogance gone, clamoring for Alan Shun to handle the mess outside. One illegitimate child might be explained away, but for appearing at once could only mean the Shun family's morals are corrupt and Alan Shun's character is flawed. Yet those 3 women spoke with unshakable confidence. We're all the Lord's women. If she can bring her child to be recognized and enjoy the wealth of the Lord's estate, why shouldn't we? Oh, so just because her child resembles the Lord, she's in the right? Then look at mine. This widow's peak and peach, blossom eyes. Aren't they carved from the same mold as the Lord's? Forget hers. Just look at my child. Those long legs and fair pink skin. Who else could they have inherited from if not his father? Mine's a bit harder to prove. After all, the birthmark on his bottom isn't something to show off publicly. The Lord's wet nurse would know at a glance. Those 3 women, whom Alan Shin kept for a year or so before discarding like worn-out shoes, once stopped his carriage demanding recognition, only to receive naked humiliation and merciless abandonment. In the end, it was I who gave them a way out with silver. Hearing that Alan Shin was in trouble, naturally, everyone rushed to help. Those who could kick him when he was down made sure to put both feet in. Overnight, children appeared from who knows where, all claiming the right to be recognized by the family. Alan Shun was backed into a corner with no way out, forced to admit defeat. The Shin family upholds a virtuous reputation, with no history of keeping mistresses, let alone allowing illegitimate sons into the household. If you persist in causing trouble here, do not blame me for reporting you to the authorities. Elder Lady Shun, lying in bed, coughed up blood repeatedly, leaving Alan Shun half dead from the ordeal throughout the night. Seated in the private room of the tavern, the 3 raised their teacups to toast me. When you, as the lady of the house, gave us silver in the past, we still harbored resentment. We resented that you relied solely on your connections in the palace to dominate Alan Shun's inner court and keep us beneath you. But later we realized that such a den of wolves was not a place we could secure our footing through mere pleasures of the bed. Fortunately, the silver you provided was ample. We cut our losses in time, and for the sake of that money, we spared ourselves days of heartache, following your advice to seek other paths. We've actually fared quite well. Now, seizing this chance to give Alan a kick while he's down, it feels like we've finally vented our pent up frustration, a toast to your clarity, to our freedom, and to Alan Shin getting exactly what he deserves. In the flickering candlelight, I saw on their faces a vividness and self-satisfaction, unlike the hesitant timidity of the past. The sky is flushed, the sea boundless. We should not draw circles around ourselves, allowing present hardships to imprison our entire lives. Leap out bravely, and a whole new world awaits. After eating and drinking their fill, they left the capital overnight. After all, Alan Shun is petty and would surely quickly devise countermeasures, striking at us unexpectedly. That they would draw their blades to aid me at such a moment is already rare camaraderie among women. I cannot further endanger them. This oppressive, dark sky foretells the coming of violent winds and heavy snow. Watching the 3 carriages vanish into the deserted street, I tightened my coat and whispered softly to the invisible figures. I am truly happy for you, living so contentedly. May you have smooth journeys and peaceful lives ahead. By the next afternoon, a heavy snowfall like goose feathers blanketed everything, and the empty streets saw scarcely any traffic. Yet it was at this very moment that Consort Shin summoned me to the palace. The eunuch said that Consort Shin, having never borne children, was filled with too much anxiety and fear, and asked Evan and me to offer her some comfort. Fully aware that my Evan was injured and had difficulty walking, the eunuch still insisted on having him carried into the palace through the fierce wind and heavy snow. Despite my earnest pleas, he refused to relent. Finally, he said with a mocking smile, "If the injury truly involves bones and tendons, it might be understandable, but I must open this cast to see whether the young master is genuinely hurt, or if lady, unwilling to let him endure the rough journey in such a storm, is deliberately defying Consort Shun's decree." I then knew that this deliberate torment of my child, meant as a warning to me, was unavoidable. I drew the great blade my grandfather used to courageously slay enemies. Perhaps my son Evan is destined to suffer, but it should only be after blood has been spilled and we bring our plea for justice before the emperor. Tell me, eunuch, when the Shun and Yun families are locked in a fight to the death, will anyone care if an insignificant eunuch dies in my courtyard? The eunuch's face turned pale, and he hastily opened a side door, inviting only me into the palace. In the howling wind and heavy snow, I stood under the corridor for 2 hours, watching as the sky darkened before Consort Shin finally summoned me inside. Adorned in brocade robes and pearls, she resembled a splendid peacock, reclining on her couch with her head held high, offering me a feigned apology as I knelt bowed to the ground. "This consort has been drowsy during pregnancy and slept until now. Sister-in-law won't blame me for neglecting you, will you? Her careless oversight, even if brought before the emperor, would grant me, drenched and chilled by the storm, no justice whatsoever." Understanding the situation, I replied, "This humble wife wouldn't dare." She chattered on for a full half hour, asking after Mother Shun's health, the Shun family's current state, and Evan Shun's condition, never once telling me to rise. Seeing that I remained neither subservient nor defiant, she lost interest and directly warned me, "That child is clever and learned, just like his father was in his youth. He is very fond of him, and so is mother. Sister-in-law has always planned 3 steps ahead. Surely you can see the Shun family's future? Times have changed. You should know how to restore the Shun family's dignity, just as they once humbled themselves to beg for face." With that, she gave a signal, and a servant brought a basket of silver charcoal and 2 meat buns before me. She raised an eyebrow and smiled at me. "Go to the cold palace to see your sister. These things she lacks. I grant them. She ought to be grateful for my generosity and protection." But beneath the tray lay a dagger. She was telling me she could give my sister security or take her life. One after another, the Shun family uses my sister to threaten me. They couldn't possibly think my sister, who's gone mad with killing in the rear palace, is some soft persimmon to be squeezed at will. I kowtowed with a cold laugh to thank her for the favor, bid a final farewell to the dying consort Shin, and carried those items into the cold palace gates. My sister, in coarse cotton clothes with her hair loose, knelt before the bodhisattva, tapping a wooden fish. Outside, the ice was 3 feet thick. Inside, the air was so cold that breath turned to frost. Yet my sister sat with her spine ramrod straight. Hearing my footsteps, the wooden fish paused, and she said, "You've come." Our grandfather commanded a mighty army, and though our parents died on the battlefield, my sister was kept as a hostage by the Empress Dowager for years. She grew up with His Majesty since his princely days. Their bond so deep, she begged our grandfather to help him ascend the throne. Yet once he secured power, he gave the Empress's title to the Prime Minister's daughter, compensating my sister with favors envied throughout the 6 palaces. But even such favor ended abruptly last year when the Empress suddenly fell ill and passed away. After a night of fierce argument, my sister smashed the Gwangju Palace and voluntarily entered the Cold Palace, where she has remained for a year. Day after day, she kneels before the Bodhisattva, chanting sutras to atone for becoming the Emperor's blade, the one who slaughtered the Empress's entire clan. A year ago, when I visited her, she gritted her teeth and roared at me with bitter resentment. That year, my child drowned in the Weiyang Palace. I wanted to investigate thoroughly, but he held me down firmly, telling me the Prime Minister had countless disciples and deep-rooted influence, while he was isolated and powerless to provoke them, urging me to endure. I endured, yet I did not. I fought the Empress to the death, annihilated her entire clan in a bloodbath, and ended her life with bowl after bowl of poison medicine. But before she died, she begged to see me once. My drowned child had nothing to do with her from start to finish. The true culprit was his inconspicuous cousin in the Yongning Palace. It was he who deliberately redirected the blame, pitting me against the Empress until we both suffered, all to fulfill his and his cousin's mutual affection. My child died with eyes wide open in grievance, and the Empress saw her entire clan obliterated under his thunderous wrath, while the noble consort stepped over our flesh and blood to raise a pair of children. The night I learned the truth, I drowned her in the Weiyang Palace lake to avenge my son. The moment he pointed his sword between my brows, I finally realized that he was the one I should have killed all along. If I had not entered the Cold Palace, how would he have let his guard down? Ahang, while I was in the Cold Palace, contact the Bai family army through our grandfather. When I break out of this place, it will be the day he meets his end. This year, I accomplished it. I pressed the Bai family army's military tally into my sister's hand and grasped her frail, thin fingers. "Sister, it's time to fight our way out." She lifted her eyelids, revealing the icy hatred in her narrow eyes. The first princess is 13 now. After years of my secret nurturing, her abilities rival her emperor father's. Her boldness matches our grandfather's. How is she any less capable than a man? So what if he killed my son? This empire will still fall into the hands of our Yun family. He brought this upon himself. Don't blame me for making his life a living hell. The howling wind battered the wooden door, making it creak and groan. A fire burned in my sister's eyes as she gazed at me intently. The storm is fierce, the road ahead treacherous. Ahang, are you brave enough? I smiled, turned and walked out, holding a flimsy umbrella. I carved a resolute path through snow 3 feet deep. Consort Shun's palace attendants stood beneath the towering palace walls, watching me stumble out in disheveled despair. They thought I'd been sufficiently chastened and would obediently bring Liu Shin back to the Shin family. Alan Shin was even more shameless. He attempted to smuggle Evan out of the Shin residence while I was in the palace, aiming to deal me a fatal blow. But unfortunately for him, he was just a step too slow. Alan Shun and I crossed paths right at the entrance of the Shin mansion. He struck me hard across the face, without hesitation. Grace Yun, what a vicious scheme. Leo will never be able to reclaim his ancestral roots now. I replied with keen interest. Is that so? Then I suppose I ought to congratulate myself. It turned out that the three-courtyard house in the west of the city had caught fire on a snowy night. As fate would have it, the gate was tightly locked, trapping Ashley Ning and her son inside. As they pounded on the door desperately, their cries drew the full-force rescue efforts of the noble neighbors on either side, all acting in self-preservation. Yet, when the gate was finally broken down, the first to rush out was a disheveled man. Before anyone could ask, he fled in a panic, vanishing into the snowstorm. Next emerged the frail mother and child, one with a burned arm, the other with a crippled leg. Only when Alan Shin rushed over and cradled the child did the crowd see the boy's face clearly. It bore a striking resemblance, 7 parts out of 10, to the man who had just fled in disgrace. The Lord had been cuckolded on a grand scale, smugly raising another man's child all along. The onlookers' expressions were a picture of grim satisfaction. Alan Shin, as if publicly slapped, roared defensively at Ashley Ning, his shame and rage only magnifying his foolishness. Finally, under the weight of everyone's pitying gazes, the truth dawned on him, whether he believed it or not, whether the child was his or not. None of that mattered. What mattered was the stain on the child's origin, a lifelong scandal that would tarnish both Alan Shin and the Shin family, turning them into objects of ridicule. That child, marked by disgrace, would never set foot in the Shun household again. When I entered the palace alone, April Ching and Pearl Lu followed my instructions. One protected Evan, the other went to the West District. In the end, no lives were lost. The authorities went through the motions before dispersing. Only Alan Shin was left utterly broken, becoming a laughingstock in others' eyes. Watching his agony, I smiled through the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, met his gaze, and slapped him hard across the face. Isn't this the retribution you brought upon yourself? And this is only the beginning. Can't handle it already? You were after my life. As he stared at me in disbelief, eyes wide with fury, the steward shouted, "It's terrible. The elder lady has vomited blood and passed away." What? Though paralyzed by stroke, unable to speak or move, the elder lady had clung to a thread of life. But when the West District suddenly faced disaster, April Ching stood on the corridor, holding a medicine bowl, vividly describing every detail to the nursemaid tasked with caring for the elder lady. Overwhelmed by rage and anxiety, the elder lady vomited blood for half an hour. Before the physician could arrive, she died in excruciating pain. Alan Shin glared at me viciously, his hands clenched tightly. Was it intentional? You want to destroy my family and make me wish for death? How cruel you are. I swear I'll make you die a miserable death. He had completely broken down, no longer even bothering to pretend. But what does he rely on to kill me? His sister in the palace? Yet that day, 2 fires broke out in the capital, one at the three-courtyard estate in the West City, and another at my sister's cold palace. After my sister awoke from her faint, she rushed into the emperor's arms with tears streaming down her face, called out his childhood name, and reclaimed everything that belonged to the royal consort. The gates of Guangji Palace swung wide open. The royal consort, once the most favored in the 6 palaces, had returned. As for Consort Shin, upon hearing the tragic news of her family, she panicked and tumbled straight down the steps, bleeding on the spot. Alas, her fetus was too large and her body too frail, making the delivery extremely difficult. The 8-month-old prince was stillborn. Consort Shin also suffered a sudden postpartum hemorrhage and passed away within half an hour. How much was fate, and how much was my sister's doing? I no longer wished to dwell on. When the tragic news reached the Shin family, Alan Shin, as the father, was forcing Evan to kneel before his grandmother in mourning. His outside son was ruined, so he sought to destroy my son with accusations of filial impiety to get back at me. Do you think I married you, despite my disgust, for nothing? Now that you've destroyed everything I had, if I give you a letter of divorce and cast you out, Do you think there's any place in this vast capital where you can survive? He looked at me with a smug, cold smile. It's just an excuse to divorce you. If you escape today, there's always tomorrow, and the day after. Our accounts will be settled one by one. Outside the Shin residence, assassins were already lying in wait for my life. Stepping out of those gates, Evan and I would be walking to our deaths. The Shin family knew, but to reclaim their lost face and dignity, they were eager to dispose of Evan and me cleanly. Unfortunately for their confident plans, before the divorce letter was even finished, their last reliance vanished as well. Not only that, the royal consort took pity on Evan's injured leg and deliberately begged His Majesty to bestow many medicinal pills. In the span of a single night, the situation drastically changed. It felt like a stark slap across the face of every member of the Shin family. Watching their horrified expressions, I faintly curled the corner of my lips. Should my Evans still observe this mourning period? The crowd gasped sharply, hurriedly lowering their posture. Naturally, the young master's health takes priority. I still have some bone, nourishing pills in my courtyard, which I'll send to Evan's quarters shortly. We can manage the morning hall. You should return and properly care for the young master. You see, it wasn't I who trampled their dignity and pride underfoot. It was they who lost their backbone for power and wealth. Amid Alan Shun's ashen expression, I asked, Lord, what of the letter of divorce? Alan Shin clenched his jaw tightly, fists balled until veins bulged. Yet under the collective pressure of the Shin family, he had no choice but to yield, words spoken in anger. After all, we were once husband and wife, bound by deep affection. A smile spread across my face as I strode away, trampling over Alan Shun's resentment, bitterness, and pain. 3 months after Shun's mother was laid to rest, envoys from a neighboring nation arrived in the capital to forge a marital alliance. They sought a princess to marry and take back to the northern wastes. The only princess of suitable age in the palace was 13, born from my sister's womb. The emperor had countless ways to resolve this, yet he chose the most despicable one, trading the title of royal consort for the first princess's hand in marriage upon her coming of age. My sister clenched her hatred and agreed, but she begged the emperor to send Alan Shin south to gather rare treasures for the princess's dowry. The emperor naturally consented. Over these 3 months, Alan Shin exhausted every means to end our lives. Yet not only did he fail, he was left severely weakened. Finally able to leave the capital, he thought it was his chance, but it was the opportunity one had begged for. On the day Alan Shin departed the city, I sent Evan to see him off. Go and take a look at him. One should always remember what scum looks like. Alan Shun's gaze drifted over us, mother and son, light and detached. With a feigned smile, he said, when I return, I will bring Evan a gift for his studies. What kind of gift? Would it be our bodies, mother and son, poisoned in the backyard well, or among the guards he bribed? Yet he treated the mother and son outside so differently, behind our backs. He gave Leo Shun and his mother tens of thousands in silver notes. Unfortunately, the moment he left, I had it all seized overnight, cleaned out completely. Even his loyal followers within the estate were purged by me. Not a single one left. One sows, another reaps. I even sent Evan to become the Grand Tutor's final disciple. The Grand Tutor assumed Alan Shun's past flattery was all for Evan's sake and gladly accepted. Half a year later, floods struck Jiangnan, and Alan Shun's boat capsized. Everyone on board survived. Only he was lost without a trace. I did it. Ashley Ning rushed up to me again, weeping and begging me to search for Alan Shun. I held the teacup, watching as her forehead bled from the impact, her face streaked with bloody tears. With just a glance, I ordered someone to bring out several severed bones. Do you truly love him to the marrow of your bones? Then look, do you recognize these bones? Ashley Ning collapsed to the ground, staring at me as if I were a ghost. I smiled. Why would I look for him? I was the one who made sure he never returned. Killing a lord right under the emperor's nose was too risky. My sister is of noble status. She shouldn't be stained with filth. So, Alan Shin had to leave the capital. Wasn't he the one who cursed my Evan as a cripple? So, I severed his limbs, cut out his tongue, and left him to beg in Jiangnan. Didn't he want to climb over our flesh and blood, then turn around and take our lives? I made sure his family perished, leaving him to suffer a disabled existence for the rest of his days. You love him. You miss him? Here's his address. Go find him. I've always been a bit softer on women. Ashley Ning is cut from the same cloth as I am, forever loving only herself. Once she realized she couldn't cling to Alan Shen as her shelter, she swiftly changed targets and became another man's mistress. Only her crippled child, drowning in countless scornful gazes and cold indifference, was completely ruined. Mother Shen praised his innate brilliance. Alan Shen called him a genius with world-changing talent, and even consort Shen applauded his exceptional qualities. But in the end, he rotted in the mud, not even worthy of polishing Evan's shoes. 2 years later, at the first princess's coming-of-age ceremony, the emperor suddenly vomited blood and collapsed during the palace banquet. The royal consort, assisting in managing the inner palace, arranged rotations of consorts to care for him, yet there was no sign of recovery. It wasn't until my sister arrived at his bedside, holding an imperial decree naming the first princess as crown princess, that the emperor suddenly realized everything had been my sister's scheme. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Over these 2 years, using the Shen family's merchant networks, I had already gathered the Bai family army together. With real gold and silver buying the finest equipment and weapons, they can naturally take on 3 times their number. With the Bai family's 100,000 troops at the city gates, whether your majesty agrees or not, my daughter will take that throne. The only question is whether your children in the palace will bleed out in rivers or be spared and sent to fiefdoms. The emperor refused to believe my sister would go that far, until consort Shu's son and daughter were strangled to death right beside his bed. Only then, in utter devastation, did the emperor who had schemed all his life finally yield. With the emperor gravely ill, the crown princess assumed regency. My sister sat poised on the high throne, smiling at me as she said, "Once the crown princess has steadied the people's hearts, all the unnecessary filth shall be purged together." She set her teacup down with a sharp click. But before that, the blood debt owed to the prime minister's household must be repaid, cut by cut, on the blade of the late empress's youngest sister. 3 years later, Evan had reached marriageable age. He rode through the streets in vibrant robes atop a spirited horse, the very picture of dashing unrestraint. The gaunt stable hand who had just brushed past him stared fixedly at his retreating figure, only snapping out of it when a whip lashed across his back, prompting him to limp forward and urge the horses onward. Who could have imagined that this limping man, reduced to being another's stable slave, was actually the half-brother of the capital's most dashing and ambitious lord? Others only knew that the stable hand's mother was shameless, becoming a mistress and getting confronted by the legal wife, stripped naked and hung at the main gate for public humiliation for half a day, then thrown out without even a thread to her name. With her reputation in ruins, who would dare take her in? Coupled with her fading looks, life grew increasingly difficult. She poured all her hatred onto her only son, even selling him into slavery to a trafficker to scrape together money for returning to her hometown. But tragically, the moment she left the capital with the silver, she was ambushed by highway bandits. Not only was the money stolen, but after suffering relentless humiliation, she was kicked into the icy river and drowned to death. Liu Xin fared no better, a frail and disabled man whose only skill was taming horses. After many twists and turns, he became a groom for the tyrannical princess. Being whipped and beaten had become routine, as had kneeling in public to endure humiliation. Today, seeing Evan Shun's carefree figure felt like a sharp lash striking straight into Leo's heart. He vented his fury by whipping the horse relentlessly when a disabled man, limbless and mute, knelt in the middle of the road, blocking his path. Rage overwhelmed him. He drove the carriage straight toward the man, cracking his whip, watching the disabled man collapse, vomiting blood in great spurts. He didn't even pause. galloping away without a second thought. As I looked at the wide-eyed, blood-vomiting, disabled man, I bent down, searching for traces of the former Alan Shun in him, but there were none. No wonder even his son Leo Shun, who stubbornly waited in the capital for his return, failed to recognize him. I smiled. After crawling all these years, from Jiangnan back to the capital, I rush through wind and do only to meet a death with unclosed eyes. Alan Shun, this is your retribution. After all, we were a respectable couple, so I came respectfully to witness your unclosed eyes in death. Alan Shun coughed up old blood and truly died with unclosed eyes under the wheels of his most beloved son's carriage. I rose and left. Evan waited in the tea house, having prepared my favorite tea snacks. After pouring me a cup of tea, he finally said, "Though kingfisher feathers are precious, my elder sister, one of the 4 highest-ranking consorts, has gifted me treasures far beyond compare. To crawl over countless mountains and rivers to meet his destined fate, repaying my broken bones' pain. Do you find it worthwhile, mother? So young, yet he has learned nearly all of my methods." The gentle breeze of early spring brushed by, and I chuckled softly in reply. Matters of the young are best decided by the young themselves. Pear blossoms by the roadside bloomed in competition, cluster upon cluster. Another year of splendid spring scenery in the imperial capital.